I am Jack Williams, and I can't say that I am a happy person. For the past years, I have lived in a marriage where, from the outside, people might have thought we were a perfect couple. But the truth is, everything ended long before I dared to admit it. We had good times, sure, but now our relationship had become so dull that I didn't even want to remember it anymore. Everything changed when I started to feel the distance from Emily. She was my wife, the woman I married after years of passionate love, but now I could hardly recognize her. Our conversations, if we had any, only revolved around lifeless topics like work, trivial details about daily life. She no longer looked at me the same way, and I didn't look at her with the admiration I once had. One evening, I came home late. She had prepared dinner but ate alone, while I rushed to skip the meal and head to the office. Emily sat on the couch, staring at me with tired eyes, as if something was weighing heavily on her heart. We didn't say much, but the silence between us wasn't comfortable. It was a strange, unsettling silence. Then I noticed something, a small thing, yet as glaring as a crack in a stone. Emily wasn't wearing her wedding ring. She had always worn it for the past 12 years, but today, her hand was bare. A feeling I couldn't explain washed over me, and I couldn't escape the thought that something was wrong. I started noticing other details I had ignored before. She no longer smiled at me, no longer embraced me when I came home, no small gestures like a handshake or a gentle stroke of my hair. Our relationship was dying, and I couldn't do anything to change it. A week later, I happened to overhear a conversation between her and an old friend on the phone. She was talking about another man, not me. She spoke of nights she didn't come home, of conversations filled with joy and emotions I no longer brought to her. And in that moment, I knew for sure she was having an affair. But I said nothing. I stayed silent. At that time, I thought I could keep everything as it was. I would pretend I didn't know, continue on as if nothing had happened. But I couldn't. The feeling of betrayal within my own home was the worst thing I had ever experienced. It felt like I was no longer her husband, like I had become invisible in my own life. And then, I decided I could no longer stay silent. I had to face the truth. One evening, when Emily came home after a long day, I sat on the couch, silently waiting. She walked in, surprised to see I was still awake. She asked, "What's wrong? Why aren't you asleep?" Her voice was no longer tender but cold, the kind of cold I had begun to feel so familiar. "I need to talk to you," I said, trying to remain calm. I didn't know where to start, but I knew this was the moment to confront her. She sat next to me, her eyes avoiding mine, as if she already knew what was coming. "You know what you've been doing, don't you?" I asked, my voice unchanged, but the determination in my words made the air in the room heavy. Emily lifted her gaze, and I could see a flash of fear in her eyes. But just for a moment, she quickly regained her cold expression. "What do you think I've been doing?" she replied, her voice soft but defiant. I looked at her and didn't answer immediately. I knew there was no need to say everything I knew. She knew, I knew, and we just needed to face it. "I'm not the man you want," I said, a line I had held inside for so long. "We're nothing to each other anymore, are we?" Emily was silent, as if my words confirmed everything she had felt. Her eyes welled with a few tears, but not out of regret, just despair. "I can end this right now," I said, my voice calm. "I don't love you anymore, Emily. I'm ready to let go." She sat there, saying nothing. The silence was heavy, but in that moment, I knew we were done. I no longer saw anything clear in Emily's eyes. Everything between us seemed to blur into indifference and distance. This feeling was strange, like we were strangers living under the same roof, reluctantly sharing space but no longer bound by anything. She stood up, turned her back to me, and walked out onto the balcony. I watched her silhouette, feeling the pain spreading deeper within me. But I knew I couldn't keep drowning in that feeling anymore. We had both had enough time to think and face the truth. It was time to make a decision, and it wasn't an easy one. Emily turned back to me, her face tired and worn. She looked at me for a moment, then sighed. "I don't want to continue anymore," she said, her voice choking as if she were trying to hold back something from deep within her heart. "This relationship doesn't mean anything to me anymore, Jack. I can't keep living like this." I looked at her, not surprised. In fact, I had already known what she was going to say, but that didn't make it feel any lighter. The sense of loss still haunted me, even though I had prepared myself for what was coming. "So you want a divorce?" I asked, not in defiance, but just as acceptance. I looked into her eyes, but I couldn't see any trace of the wife I once loved. Only fatigue, emptiness, and a longing to escape everything. Emily didn't answer immediately. She just stood there silently, her eyes seemingly searching for something in the empty space before her. But I knew the answer. I could see it in her eyes, in every gesture she no longer gave me, that this relationship had ended long ago. "I think this is the right thing," she finally spoke, her hands hanging loosely at her sides. "I don't love you anymore, Jack. I can't pretend to be happy anymore." I sat down, saying nothing. A part of me wanted to cry, but I couldn't. I had been caught in this spiral of pain for so long, there were no more tears left for what had passed. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back the panic rising in my chest. "Fine," I said, my voice soft but firm. "If that's what you want, then I have no reason to stop you. We will get a divorce." As those words left my mouth, I felt a strange sense of relief. A part of me felt like I had just put down a heavy burden, but the rest of me sank deeper into the feeling of loss, and I couldn't understand why I felt lighter when I was the one agreeing to end this. Emily looked at me, her eyes red but with no tears falling. She nodded, as if feeling relief that everything had finally come to an end. But something in me shattered when I saw her look at me as if I were a stranger. "I'll find a lawyer," Emily said, her voice soft but resolute. "I won't make you suffer anymore. You don't have to worry about anything." "I'm not worried," I replied. "It's all over now." Emily walked toward the door, then stopped. She turned back to look at me one last time, this time with a look that held no hate or pain. It was just exhaustion, as if she had been drained from a long battle. "I'll always remember the good times," she said, but I couldn't hear the truth in those words. It was just a farewell, something she had said many times throughout our marriage, but it no longer meant anything. As she left, I sat alone in the empty room, where our pictures hung on the walls, the items we had once used to build our life together now just meaningless things. A sense of emptiness washed over me, and I realized I had lost myself throughout all these years. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Could I start over? Could I live without Emily? I wasn't sure, but what I knew was that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of a marriage that was no longer mine. Our relationship ended not with a loud bang, but with a silent nod, a letting go that didn't require another word. And as Emily walked out the door, I knew I could never go back. There's something strange when you suddenly realize you can breathe freely for the first time in a long time. My room was now empty and still. No more laughter, no more uneasy conversations. An immense void where my family's home once stood, now only cold walls and faint traces of the past remained. At first, I didn't know what to do with myself. The emptiness overwhelmed me, but there was also a part of me that breathed a sigh of relief, as though I had been freed from a binding relationship. And then, I began to rediscover the things I had forgotten over the years. Things that Emily, or maybe I, had stopped caring about. Hobbies, joys I hadn't thought of when we were caught up in the grind of work and daily life. I began to go out more, trying activities I hadn't thought of before. Evenings with old friends, spontaneous encounters with new people, and sometimes just wandering around the city aimlessly. I could sit alone at a cafe without worrying about having to explain myself, enjoying quiet mornings without the tension at home. Then I met Nancy. She was a new colleague at work, but unlike all the women I had met before, she was different. She was straightforward, not waiting for me to drag things out, but lively and cheerful. When we started talking, I immediately felt she had something special, something approachable and comforting. It made me feel somewhat soothed after such a long time of being hurt. Nancy, perhaps, was the first person who made me feel like I hadn't completely been imprisoned in the past. She didn't push me to express unresolved feelings. She was just there, listening and offering simple stories so I didn't feel like a guilty or failing human being. And then, one afternoon, when I was having coffee with Nancy, I realized how much I had opened up. This feeling, this freedom, made me feel like I was alive again, like a different man, not the husband left behind. But it also made me think of Emily, reminded me of the feelings I once had for her, and suddenly, I asked myself whether I was truly ready to move on without any scars in my heart. And then I met Emily again. She came to see me unexpectedly, standing outside my office when I had just finished a meeting. This time, it wasn't the same awkwardness as before. There were no words of reproach or pretending to care. She just stood there, looking at me as though wanting to say something but couldn't bring herself to speak. "Can you spare me some time?" she asked, her voice soft and hesitant. I looked at her, then looked over at Nancy, who was standing not far away. I felt like there was a strong twist inside me, as if both worlds of mine, before and after the divorce, were colliding. Honestly, I didn't know what to do in this situation. "We can talk during lunch break," I replied, trying not to let emotions overwhelm my logic. "What's going on?" Emily looked at me with eyes as if she had come back seeking forgiveness, something I never thought she could truly feel after everything that had happened. But when she spoke the next words, I realized that perhaps she was finally beginning to face the truth she had always been running from. "I'm not sure anymore, Jack. I don't know what to do. I asked for the divorce, but now I feel like I was wrong," Emily said, her eyes blurred with the tears she was trying to hold back. "I don't want to lose you, but I can't continue living in a relationship where I no longer feel happy." I looked at her and felt a pang of sympathy, but I couldn't let myself get pulled into her emotions. "Emily, you had the right to make your decision," I said, my voice calm, but I could feel the sorrow in my words. "I've tried to endure, but we've gone too far. We can't go back. Everything has changed. I've found myself." Emily sat down, saying nothing further. We both sat there, in silence, as if time had stopped. But then, when she stood up and prepared to leave, I knew that this meeting was not to reconcile but for us to start a new chapter in our lives. No more ties, no more guilt, but also not a complete abandonment. "Good luck," I said, not because I didn't care anymore, but because I knew we both needed to learn how to love ourselves before we could love anyone else. As Emily walked out, I turned back to Nancy, who was still standing there, looking at me with a curious gaze. I didn't say anything, just shook my head and returned to my work. I knew I wasn't fully ready yet, but at least I had begun a healing journey for myself. And sometimes, that's the first step in finding happiness again. Day by day, I began to feel like I was finding myself again. Each morning I woke up, I no longer felt weighed down by the memories of Emily or the life we had before. I wasn't the same man anymore, the one who had given everything to please someone who no longer loved him. But during those months, a part of me still couldn't fully let go. Emily had once been my whole world, and although I could say I had moved on, there were scars that couldn't be erased. I started reconnecting with old friends I hadn't contacted in a long time. Carefree hangouts, easy conversations. I found joy in simple things. Still, those happy moments couldn't fill the void in my heart, a void I couldn't explain. One afternoon, I received a call from Emily. On the other end of the line, her voice was weak, no longer confident like before. "Can you meet me one more time, Jack? I need to talk." When I arrived at the cafe we had often visited, I couldn't help but feel the shift in the atmosphere. Everything around was the same, but Emily's presence made me feel like there had been a significant change. She was sitting there, looking at me with eyes no longer filled with anger or blame, but hesitation, uncertainty. I know you might be angry with me," she said, her voice trembling. "But I was wrong. I don't know why I let things go this far. I hurt you, and I can't live with that." I looked at her, clearly sensing the regret in her words. But perhaps what I needed more than anything was time to truly understand my own feelings. I wasn't the man I once was, but I also wasn't someone who could forget the past immediately. I couldn't simply forgive, but I also couldn't continue living in hatred. "Emily, I can't keep living in this emotional mess. I've been hurt, but I also know I can't go back to you," I said, my voice calm but not hiding the weight in my heart. "I spent so much time finding myself. You can't ask me to overlook everything just because you feel regret." She lowered her head, saying nothing more. I saw tears begin to fall, but this time, it wasn't regret trying to make amends. She wasn't crying because she wanted to come back, but because she realized that everything could no longer be fixed. "I've always loved you, Jack. I just didn't realize it when you were still with me. Now that I've lost you, I know how wrong I was," Emily choked out. "I don't know what to do now. It's just, I want you to know that I'm truly sorry." Her words cut into my heart like a knife. Sympathy, sorrow, all of it rushed over me. I knew she truly felt regret, but inside me, there was a different feeling, a feeling from someone who had lost faith in the love he had once given so freely. I couldn't go back to her, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because that love wasn't enough to save everything we had let slip away. Some things can't be changed, no matter how badly we want them to. "Emily, I understand how you feel, but I can't go back. That marriage died long ago, and neither of us can live in the past forever," I said softly, trying to control my emotions. "I was once your husband, and you were my wife. But now, we're just two strangers. And I think it's time we let everything go." She didn't say anything more, just nodded gently. I felt the change in her. It wasn't sorrow, but acceptance, a kind of acceptance that both she and I could not deny. When I stood up to leave, Emily stood up with me. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I hope that one day, you'll understand me and forgive me," she said. I smiled, not a smile of disdain or anger, but a smile of release. "I will forgive you, but not right now. Time will heal everything. But you also need to understand, you're no longer a part of my life." Then I turned away, feeling like a door was closing behind me, not as the end of a sad story, but as the beginning of a new chapter in my life. I was ready to move on, to live with what I had, with the new opportunities life would bring. Everything changed when I began to realize something simple that I had overlooked all these years. I had been too focused on holding onto a marriage that no longer existed, forgetting that this life wasn't just about what had passed. After meeting with Emily, I felt like I had placed a period on the past and a period on the present. No more inner turmoil, no more wondering if I could go back to her. Each day that passed, I began living a new life. I met more people, traveled more, and no longer felt suffocated within the old walls of my previous life. Nancy, the new friend, became a part of my life. But I wasn't looking for a serious relationship right now. I just needed fun, freedom. Nancy understood that, And we continued our friendship, sometimes grabbing a bite and chatting casually, no commitments or expectations. One evening, when I sat having coffee with Nancy, I realized something important. Happiness isn't about seeking replacement love, but about accepting that the end of one chapter in life can open another, full of hope. I didn't need to cling to the past or mourn what was lost. I just needed to live for myself and enjoy the moments in the present. I had never felt freer than I did now. Light encounters with new people, short trips, late nights wandering the streets, all of it made me feel like I was living again. I no longer felt bound, no longer guilty. And most importantly, I no longer looked at my ex, Emily, as an irreplaceable part of my life. But life is never that simple. After a while, I received a call. Emily. She said she wanted to meet me. I knew we were no longer married, and no matter what, this would just be a final meeting, but something else rose inside me, not worry, but calmness, as if I were facing an old friend. When we met, Emily was no longer the woman I once knew. She was different. She no longer blamed me or herself. She just sat there, calm and sincere. I want to thank you for helping me realize that we can't live forever with the mistakes of the past, she said, her voice gentle, but with a hint of weakness. I know I hurt you deeply, but I also realized that I need to change. I didn't say anything, just looked at her. I had once wanted explanations, wanted a clear ending to this relationship, but now I didn't need that anymore. She could change, but I couldn't go back to her. I think you found your path, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Everyone needs to learn how to love themselves and face their mistakes. I can't help you anymore, Emily. But I hope you'll find peace. She nodded, saying nothing more. Her eyes looked at me with gratitude. And in that moment, I realized that both of us had completed our journeys. We were no longer each other's, but we weren't facing each other in resentment or pain either. It was all over, and we had both learned our own lessons. When I returned to my life, I realized that change isn't always easy. But in this life, if we know how to let go and accept change, we will always find the way forward. I no longer sought perfect love, but simply wanted to live my life, love myself, and those around me in a way I had long forgotten. With every step forward, I understood that love isn't a destination, but a journey. A journey full of challenges, but also full of opportunities for us to find ourselves. And I had found myself, free, grown, and ready for whatever life would bring. In love and life, sometimes we have to face the uncomfortable truth that not every relationship can be saved. But letting go is not the end, it's an opportunity to start again. What matters is loving ourselves, accepting the past, and finding peace in the present. We cannot change others, but we can change how we face every situation, and most importantly, we must learn to love ourselves before we can love anyone else.